Hello, welcome, and thank you so much for joining me on this episode of A Podcaster Says What, in which we are going to be deconstructing the myth of the strong female character. Now, before you get all up in arms, I could easily have said debunking the myth of the strong character, because I do not believe that there is such a thing as a strong character, be it male or female. However, there is not and never has been a clamoring for more strong male characters. No one is saying, I liked this movie because it had a strong male character. We need more strong male characters in our media. Hey, can anybody recommend a show or series that has a strong male character? It's not a thing. And in point of fact, up until about 7, maybe 10 years ago, there was no clamoring for a strong female character either. And it wasn't because there was a dearth of them. I mean, you can go back to, was it Gone with the Wind? Was, I believe, 1940. Wizard of Oz, I think, was 39. You had Dorothy Gale, you had Scarlett O'Hara, and then Singing in the Rain, 1952, you had Kathy Selden. And these, by what I would consider reasonable modern definitions of a strong female character, these characters would easily fit the bill. But they weren't heralded as strong female characters at the time. They weren't considered empowering or any such thing. Those concepts didn't exist. They were simply well-written characters in well-done movies, and that's all it should ever be. But we have this modern fixation, this very bizarre fixation and obsession with having strong female characters. And the problem is they don't exist, as I said. And there are actually two reasons why I believe there is absolutely no substance to the claim of a strong female character. And the first reason is that the word strong itself is a big nothing. It means absolutely diddly squat. Let's take a look at the actual definitions, and there are many of them, of strong. We're not going to go over all of them, but I want to hit on a few of them to illustrate a point. So the first one is having or marked by great physical power. So this is obviously not what we're talking about here. We're not talking about muscles, but it is actually very instructive. Physical power is probably the most observable and the most measurable type of strength you can have, and yet there is no standard for it. What does great physical power mean? Is it how many push-ups you can do? How many sit-ups you can do? Well, that's only using certain muscle groups. How do you talk about leg strength and endurance and all these other possible factors in whether or not somebody has physical power? How do you quantify that? We can't even do that with something as measurable as physical power. So how in the world are we supposed to apply that to something abstract like perseverance or trustworthiness or any other positive character trait that you may associate with a strong character? Having moral or intellectual power. And this has to be a modern one because it's first of all, it makes no sense. And second of all, it sounds kind of scary, but it ties in with the fixation on power dynamics, which also ties into the whole strong female character thing. But moral power? What the heck is moral power? Intellectual power? I've never had two words put together that I understand what they actually mean individually, but when you put them together, they don't actually create a new understanding or a new concept. Is it that you can impose your morality on somebody? Is that moral power? Or can you use your intellectual power to take the world? I don't have no clue what the heck that means. Having great resources as of wealth, specified number, striking or superior of its kind. I want to skip down to one that I think really ties into or really hits home the ambiguity and the problems, the complexity that is involved that makes the word strong a big nothing. Not easily injured or disturbed, not easily subdued or taken. And you can't see it, but below that, the example is a strong fort. So not easily subdued or taken. What does easily mean? Can you say a fort is strong if it isn't able to be taken within 10 days, 3 weeks? What is the measure of what is considered easily taken, and what is the threshold that we have to maintain in order to say it's a strong fort? And to add complexity to that, what about the adversity? What about the people that are trying to take the fort? If it's literally two people with toothpicks, any fort is going to look strong. You could probably have most forts that will survive for 3 or 4 months. But if you have an assault force with 100,000 people and trebuchets and catapults, even a strong fortress or fort can be taken in 2 or 3 days. So you not only have to factor in, you not only have to establish a baseline of what constitutes something that is difficult to be taken, a fort that is difficult to be taken, but you also have to factor in the forces that are trying to take it and how formidable they are. So you can see just by these definitions, and I obviously need to go, there was one I did want to touch on as well. Effective or efficient, especially in a specified direction. That one is probably the closest one out of all these definitions to actually get into, or the most helpful when we're talking about strength. And that's going to be our next point, because it says a specified direction. But I want to ask you, when you hear the word strong, what actually comes to mind? When you say it's a strong character, what does that actually mean? If you say, oh, this character is strong and they can endure this hardship they're going through, what does endure the hardship mean? Does it simply mean they stay alive? Does it mean that they don't turn to addictive substances? Does it mean they don't show emotion? Does it mean they don't cry? What is the measure of it? And I guarantee you it's going to be subjective. It's going to be different for each person, and it's going to vary. The person's actual resilience or their actual strength in that moment is going to be dependent on a whole variety of factors, including when it happens, where they're at in their lives, what else is going on in their lives. It's a bunch of compounding variables. It's impossible to define someone as strong, because the word itself doesn't actually have an application. It really can't be applied to anything significantly. We don't have measurements in place to define something as strong or weak. So that's the first reason. And while we're talking about words, let me just dip into one word that really rankles me. It gets lumped in with the strong female label, and that is a strong, independent woman. Listen to me closely, folks. Independence is a preference. It doesn't make you better. It doesn't make you exceptional. It doesn't make you anything. It is simply how you prefer to do your task, how you want to live your life. And I can say that because I am an independently wired person. Everybody pretty much on my mother's side of the family, fiercely independent. All that means is if there's a task that I can do and fulfill it within the parameters that are given to me, I would rather do it by myself 99% of the time than take help. And it's not because, oh, I need to prove myself, or because I'm that resilient, or it makes me special, or I'm better than other people. It's simply, I would rather spend that time by myself and work at it by myself. I would rather work by myself for 8 hours than to work with somebody for 4 or 6 hours. Most of the time. Now, there are some times, like if you're trying to mount a large TV, it's exponentially easier to have an extra set of hands. It's really, you got to speak from experience. You really have to go through a lot of hoops to try to, get a big mount up on the wall and get it mounted safely and securely by yourself. It can be very tricky. I would accept help in that situation. I also had one time a young lady, Ellie, codename, who offered to help me move. I didn't need help moving, but I was touched by the gesture, by the fact that she wanted to help me. And I actually liked her, so I wanted to spend time with her. So I accepted it in the spirit that it was given, in the spirit that it was offered, and not necessarily as a function, but just as her heart for me going, hey, I'd like to help you out. And then also because I would rather spend that time with her than spend it by myself. And that is kind of the exact same reason why you will find even fiercely independent women accepting help from a man when a man wants to open a car door. It's just a man saying, hey, there's no dragon for me to slay right now. There's no big obstacle for me to take out of your life, but there's a car door in your way. Let me take this obstacle out of your way. It's not because I don't think you're capable, because you got these weak little arms and I don't think you can handle a car door or the door to Macy's. I simply want to remove that obstacle. And women, most of them, can understand the gesture and accept the gesture. Here's what he's trying to do. I don't need him to do it, but I'm grateful that he has that desire to remove this obstacle from my life. So there are times when even somebody independent can accept help, or is willing to accept help that isn't really needed. But most of the time, I would rather just put in some earbuds, rock out to some music, think deep thoughts, come up with podcast ideas. It is simply a matter of my preference, how I want to live my life. And here's the converse of that, the other side of that. If I turn down help when I actually need it, I am no longer independent. I am simply stupid. I am an arrogant, pig-headed, stupid moron. I don't know if I needed to compound moron with stupid, but anyway, I mean, that's the truth of the matter. So if you are a strong, independent person and you hang your identity on that to the point where you are working at a deficit, where you are deficient in the work you're doing because you're insisting on doing it yourself, that's not independence. That is stupidity. So the word independent also, just like strong, doesn't mean anything, or it doesn't actually vouch for anything special about a character. Either you're fully capable of doing it and you're simply choosing to do it by yourself because that's what you'd rather do, or you're pig-headed and you're doing it by yourself and you really aren't capable of satisfying the criteria for getting it done, but you're insisting to do it yourself because you're arrogant, in which case that's not really something to be admired or appreciated. So the first reason I do not believe there is such a thing as a strong character is because the word strong itself means absolutely nothing. It sounds great. It sounds good to say that's a strong character, but when you really try to figure out what strong translates to, how it actually manifests itself in somebody's life, you come up empty. So the word itself is a big nothing. The second reason is because we do not describe or define real people as strong or weak. We know better than to try to paint with that broad of a brush. You can't just say that somebody in their entirety is either strong or weak. And if we don't do that for real people, why would we do that with characters who are supposed to represent real people? They're supposed to be somebody that we can connect with in real life. Why would it be any different? Why can we have strong characters but not strong people? The exception to that is sometimes you will hear a certain aspect of someone's life referred to as strong or weak. Even then, it's very rare, but sometimes you do. Usually when it comes to a profession. So he's a strong quarterback. She's a strong CEO. And the reason why you will hear those terms used in a profession is because professions typically have features built in to help really hone in on whether or not somebody is doing their job well. You have statistics, you have metrics, you have measurable goals, and all of those help to form a relatively objective way of looking at someone's role and their performance. So it actually has a function. You can actually, the word strong in those particular situations actually has some kind of meaning and some way to measure it. But here's the catch. You can be a strong quarterback and be a garbage husband. You can be a strong CEO and still be a horrible mother. Like, those two things can exist at the same time, and they often do. Our lives are not just, oh, I'm strong right now, now I'm weak. I'm strong right now, now I'm weak. We operate consistently with strength and weakness either in tandem or in parallel. In tandem, meaning if you are if you have fear, which is a weakness, then you can demonstrate courage. Fear leads into courage and enables courage to take place. Courage is a strength. If there is no fear, there is no courage. If you are without fear, you are simply fearless, which is not the same as courageous. So they're working in tandem. Weakness gives rise to strength, gives definition to strength, or allows a strength to manifest. Or it's running in parallel, as in this case. You can be awesome in your professional life and suck in your personal life. Jerry Maguire was a great movie, or a movie I enjoyed, I should say, that hit that nail on the head. He was great in his professional life. He could really work very well with other agents and with his clients. He really cared about them. He even showed some growth initially in the movie where he kind of reconsiders what his professional life is and how he has been relating to people and kind of raises that to the next level. But his personal life is still absolute crap. And it takes until the very end of the movie for him to kind of resolve that. So is he strong or weak? Well, in certain aspects, very strong. Certain aspects, very weak. You can't just describe him in total as strong or weak. So those are the reasons why we've never described. Oh, and just as a side note, when you get outside of the profession, you don't really hear the word strong being used, even in just certain aspects of somebody's life. Like, you don't hear he's a strong father. You'll hear he's an involved father, or she won't be a strong wife. She's an affectionate wife. There are many other adjectives that we use to describe different aspects and different relationships that people have. Strong usually doesn't factor in. So again, why is this being introduced? Why is this word that doesn't really mean anything, doesn't get used in real life? Why is that now being used? Not even to describe male and female characters, but simply for female characters. Because it's a construct, it's a fabrication, it's a fixation of the modern time for a multitude of reasons. But just like a zit, a pimple on somebody's face, there is much nastiness under the surface. The pimple is just a manifestation of that. And I think the idea, the concept of a strong female character is just a pimple on the face of society, and there's a strong undercurrent of depravity and perversion that is underneath of that. I'm not prepared to get into all that today, so we're going to leave it at that. But I think that's where that comes from. That's why we have this concept. But moving on, what we're going to go through is essentially up here we have not a strong character. We have 3 bad takes on what a strong character is. When people say, I want to see more strong female characters, they mean one of 3 things, and none of them actually are indicative of a strong character as we would like to think of it. Then you have your baseline, which encompasses for me, in my view, the entirety almost of the human experience, which is neither strong nor weak exclusively. And then below that, you have your weakness or your weak characters. I do believe there is such a thing as a weak character. We're going to start with the baseline. The baseline, it's not thin, it's thick. Think of like a ribbon, a 1.5 foot ribbon. And within all of that is all the complexities that we go through as human beings. You can have somebody who is an introvert, and they're going to look very, very strong in certain circumstances just because that's how they're wired. They're going to look very good, very strong, very capable when they're by themselves, when they're being energized by their isolation, essentially. I mean, they're not truly isolated, but they're being by themselves makes them come alive. So if you take a snapshot of them in their element, they're going to look very strong. But the next in 5 minutes, when they have to go to a grocery store, or if they have to go into a classroom, or they have to go in front of a large group of people, and not maybe to speak in front of those people, but just to mingle with them, after about an hour and a half, you're probably going to see them looking very less than spectacular, because now they're out of their element. They're being drained slowly of their energy. They don't thrive in that environment. They're not strong or weak. They're very effective in certain situations and less effective in others. And the inverse is true of an extrovert. An extrovert is going to be the life of the party, is going to mingle very well, is going to seem very social, very well adjusted. But if you put that extrovert in a room by themselves for 2 or 3 days, they're going to look very, very weak and pathetic because they're not getting what they need. We as human beings have, just in our general makeup, instances, or I guess tendencies, that strengths and weaknesses that are going to make us look good in certain situations and crappy in other ones. It's not a universal thing. And so, and even then, something like perseverance, I may be able to persevere in a certain circumstance, maybe physical endurance. Like say I break my leg and I've got to persevere, get through the training, the rehabilitation process. Some people really struggle with that. Maybe I don't, because when it comes to physical pain and discomfort, I can push through that. But me after a breakup, I'm a puddle. I'm a mess, because emotional perseverance or emotional fortitude is something that I'm an area of my life that I'm weaker in. And so you have all of that is within the baseline. It doesn't make you a strong or weak person. It just means in different situations and different circumstances, you're going to thrive or struggle. And we all have thresholds. No matter how strong you are in a certain area, there is going to be a threshold where you simply cannot cross, or you're going to cross with great difficulty. And when life is punching in the face, kicking in the crotch, and taking out your knees, sometimes you hit that threshold and you fall flat on your face, even if it's something that historically you have been strong in. If people are like, oh, he can handle, he had a death in the family, he handled it really well, he's really strong, he handled it well 2 years ago. There's a death in the family now, he's strong, he can handle it now. Well, the circumstances are different now. The relationship is different. Where he's at in his life is different. He may not handle it well. He may not handle it and be strong. But that's part of the human condition. It doesn't define him as weak or strong. What we have, in fact, are moments of strength, moments of weakness, and they all fluctuate within that baseline. And if you string together enough moments of strength, you can peak into a moment of triumph, and that elevates your baseline. So if you're struggling with like a phobia of, let's just say, pencils, and I think that's the most obscure, I don't even know if there is such a thing as a fear of pencils, but it's an irrational fear, a fear of pencils. And if you grapple with that, you're demonstrating perseverance, you're demonstrating courage, all these things, moments of strength. When the day finally comes that you can actually take hold of that pencil and use it just like everybody else, your baseline is elevated and you become stronger. But it would be very hard to say that somebody is strong just because they can write with a pencil. Just because you're not, turning into a puddle and wetting yourself and rocking back and forth at the sight of a pencil doesn't mean you are a strong person. You had moments of strength and you had a moment of triumph, but now that your baseline is elevated, those moments of strength are no longer exist in the context of that pencil. Whereas before, being just in the same vicinity of that pencil would have been an indication of strength or would have been a moment of strength. Now that your baseline is elevated, now that you can write with this pencil and not have a problem, that you're no longer displaying moments of strength by doing that. You're just like everybody else. And so we can elevate our own baseline. And in theory, that's what we're doing every single day when we wake up and say, hey, I'm going to be better today than I was yesterday. I know I have room for growth. I know I have room to improve, and I want to get better. As long as that's your mentality, over time, kind of like the stock market, you're going to trend upwards. Your baseline is going to be consistently elevated. You're going to become a better, stronger person. But at what point do you say, okay, he's become stronger and now he's truly strong? It never happens. It's never going to be that way because it's individually based. And as I've said before, there are so many different variables involved in those moments of strength and weakness that it's impossible to actually come to a conclusion and say, this particular moment at this particular time, in this particular situation, this is a demonstration of strength. It's way too ambiguous. Under that baseline, however, is weakness, which is something that is very dangerous because it is like gravity. It's always trying to pull you down. This is things like addictions, resentment, bitterness, greed, unchecked ambition, a plethora of things. Anything you can think of that's a negative attribute or a negative characteristic. It is possible to live almost perpetually in a state of weakness. In theory, the hope is you're being dragged down occasionally, and that within that you're operating in that baseline, and you have a moment of weakness and you dip down into that weakness, and then you pull yourself back up, or you come back out of it because circumstances change, time passes, or you just go, oh my gosh, I don't want to be like this. But you can function. There are people who can function within addiction for the entirety of their lives. Certain addictions will end your life, but a lot of them you can actually suffer under them or with them or under that burden for the entirety of your life. So you can function in weakness. You can live with resentment and bitterness every single day. And sometimes it's a specific relationship, but a lot of times resentment and bitterness, they're just something that you saddle, that you take on, and you never really shake it off unless you purpose to get rid of it. People live under the weight of that, and you can see it manifest in their lives at different points, and it gets really ugly. But that's why I believe you can have a weak character, because you can exist in a state of perpetual weakness. But usually when it comes to writing characters, those are your villains. Most villains don't grow. They don't progress. If they start off weak, they remain weak. If they're obsessed with greed and they don't care about other people's lives, they're self-centered, they're seething with bitterness and unforgiveness, they're going to carry that through until the end. That's what allows them to remain as villains in movies and in TV shows. Sometimes it's going to be your side characters as well, because you have a finite amount of time and a finite amount of pages in terms of your script. You can't flesh out every single character. So sometimes you're going to have a weak character, but again, written specifically for a reason. And so the weakness is, having a weak character is a choice. It's not a poorly written character. Don't want to mix those two up. It can be a well-written character, but it is still a weak character because it actually doesn't manifest strength in any reasonable shape or form. Doesn't mean that they're not powerful or they're not capable, but they are dwelling in that mire of weakness in perpetuity. So you have weak characters, but as I said, they have to be written specifically. There's intention there because, as I said, just like real people, real characters, if you have a protagonist, most protagonists are going to grow over the course of a movie. They're always going to be trending upward. There's going to be something that they overcome at the end. So even if they're really looking pretty weak and messed up and pathetic at the beginning, by the end, something will have changed. They will have made some kind of turn or some kind of change. It may not be huge, but it is going to be there. And so you can say, well, they went from a weak state into, they had moments of strength that culminated in a moment of triumph, and their baseline got elevated. So now we've covered weakness, we've covered the baseline. Now let's get into the crux of the matter. What are the three uses of the word strong that actually really aren't indicative of strong? They're counterfeits, if you want to think of it that way. The first one is the strong female caricature. A caricature is a drawing where you exaggerate certain features, you take things out of proportion, and it's usually done for comedic effect. The problem is, if you go to an artist and say, I would like a portrait done to hang on the family wall, and he gives you a caricature, you look at it and go, okay, that's kind of funny, but that's a very gross exaggeration. It's comical, but it is a ridiculous exaggeration of a lot of my features, and it makes me kind of look really goofy and kind of funny. It's amusing, but I need a portrait. If the artist comes back and says, no, that is a portrait, then it stops being funny and it becomes tragic. And that's the problem that we have in a lot of modern media. We have female caricatures, strong caricatures, being presented to us as strong characters. And the people clamoring for this particular kind of character, fortunately, there's not a lot of them. But unfortunately, they have the loudest voice. They are the loudest. And I think there's a synergy here, because in order to think that a strong female caricature is a strong character, you have to have what I will put generously as a childlike mind. You are responding to overt, superficial stimulus imagery that automatically just makes you think, oh, strong. These are things like, oh, she punched him in the face really hard and he fell down. Strong female character. She's smoking a cigarette, swilling a beer, and carrying a big gun. Strong, badass female character. She breaks up with the guy, doesn't shed a tear, has absolutely zero emotional connection to him. He's simping on the ground, he's whimpering, he's holding her leg and saying, please don't leave me. And she says, you had your chance. I'm done with you. Ooh, strong female character. She's a CEO. She's in authority, a position of authority, of leadership, and she's walking around, kind of strutting around, and people are looking at her going, oh my gosh, she's amazing. She has 5 degrees from Harvard. We're so lucky to have her around here. Oh my gosh, she's so amazing. Strong female character. If you're in a position of power, then or an authority, you're a strong female character. These are, again, superficial things. They don't actually mean anything. In fact, some of them are actually demonstrate the opposite. I would say if you punch somebody in the face because they said something to you you didn't like, that's not demonstrating strength. That's demonstrating the fact that you're easily manipulated, that you have no self-control, and that you are willing to jeopardize your future. Because if you go in front of a judge and say, well, yes, Your Honor, I caused $10,000 of dental work to this person, but you didn't hear what he said about my favorite anime show, it's not going to go well for you, because the law doesn't really favor and say, well, you know what, if your feelings got hurt because of what somebody said, it's okay to inflict physical harm on them. So there are many instances where you could argue, as I said, it's subjective, where you can look at a moment of strength and actually go, no, I think that's actually a weakness. That's actually demonstrating the exact opposite. And the same thing, hey, you got your character, she's smoking, she's drinking, okay, her health is probably sucking. Like, that's not actually, doesn't mean anything intrinsically about her. It could actually be that she's suffering from a lot of addictions and she's wallowing in weakness, but because the optics are there, because it's overtly showing imagery that people think, oh, that means strong, that's how they interpret it. So you have the strong female caricature. This is probably most easily exemplified or demonstrated in, I would say, almost anything Disney has done or put out in the past 5 to 7 years, somewhere around there. Pretty much every one of their female characters are actually female caricatures. And if you're thinking about the male counterpoint, the first person that came to my mind, and apologies to him because I don't know him as an actor, he's probably a fine person, but Jason Strathholm, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, he's an actor from the UK, typically bald and has a scruffy beard. I first saw him in Snatch, which I think was one of his more fleshed out roles, one of his better roles. But he plays in movies like Transporter, and he always kind of plays the same character. It's a male caricature. It's the buff, tough, rough, don't care about nothing, has just enough, sex appeal to make it somewhat believable that the girl that's involved with his shenanigans falls in love with him or cares about him. But in general, he is what you think of as a strong caricature of the male persuasion. And a lot of movies from the 80s and 90s, admittedly, a lot of those action movies are male caricatures. But here's the difference, folks. Those movies, they weren't parodies. They weren't making fun of themselves, but they were always done. They always felt like they were done with kind of like a wink. It was kind of done with tongue in cheek. It was like, okay, yeah, this is an action movie. It's bombastic. It's over the top. We know that. we're gonna play it serious, but we understand. Like we're showing you things, and it's obvious this is just playing into this ridiculous scenario. The guy's standing in the middle of the road, people are shooting at him, rockets are going off around him. He's not getting hit, but he's picking off the bad guys one by one. We're not supposed to take this seriously. We're not supposed to have a true emotional investment. We're not supposed to look at this as a strong character. And nobody has ever said that. Nobody's looked at, I can't even think of how many there are, but the action movies from those times have been like, whoa, that's a strong male character. It's like, no, it's a lot of fun. It's a fun romp, but it's not supposed to be taken seriously. Nobody's confusing strong character with strong caricature, at least when it comes to males. When it comes to females, the problem is, as I said, it's funny until you realize that they're taking themselves very seriously and they're taking these characters very seriously, and they genuinely think they are presenting a strong female character when in fact it is a gross exaggeration that really only resonates with people who have a childlike view of what a strong character would look like. So that's the first misappropriation. As I said, it's the loudest. It's the ones you're going to hear that are going to come across the most. And I think the ones that are being pandered to the most, but they're not the most, not prolific. They're not the most common. There's fewer of them, but they are very loud. As you would expect of someone with a childlike mind. We're gonna throw a fit. We're gonna scream. We're gonna say, I need to see these specific things, otherwise it doesn't register in my brain as strength. So you can't even have, for those folks, you can't even have moments of strength that have any subtlety to them or any nuance, because they need it to just be in their face and understand that this is an exalted, amazing character. The second version is a little more, I already said it, but kind of nuanced, and that is, if you only see moments of strength, if every time a character is on screen, they're only operating in a moment of strength, they're saying the right thing, they're doing the right thing, they're making the right arguments, they are, they're demonstrating strength at every single time that you see them. That is not a strong character. That is a poorly written character. Well-written characters, just like people, reflect a good reflection of an actual person, is a mix of strengths and weaknesses, moments of strength and moments of weakness. It's very, very easy, almost brainless, the irony of that, where I'm trying to think of a word that means brainless. And anyway, it is a mindless endeavor. You can easily write an overpowered character. You can easily write things that are not balanced. It's very difficult to manage strengths and weaknesses in a way that still allow for that character to prevail and to reach their goal, and to not be despicable or not be pitiful or not be ultimately despised. It's a delicate mix, but it's something that you actually have to think about. When I'm writing characters myself, I don't have any published work, but I am working on several different projects, and I have the tendency to want to write my characters as strong. Like I always want them to be, ahead of the enemy, ahead of their opponent. I want them to always say the right thing or to be, compassionate at the right times. But that's not realistic. So you actually kind of have to make a conscious effort to show your character having moments of weakness, maybe even dipping into weakness for an extended period of time in order to raise them up and exalt them. It's very difficult to show a character with a upward trajectory in terms of their character development, to show a positive arc if you start them off in a place of strength. If all you see are moments of strength, it's a line that doesn't fluctuate, it doesn't move, and it's very boring to watch. You typically want to have your character start off deficient in some way, particularly at the beginning, and the more deficient they are, the more dire the situation, the more they are lacking, the better off they're going to look at the end of it when they come out of it. So you need to have that contrast, and you need to be able to show that the character has those weaknesses. And for the record, mistakes are not weaknesses. I referred to earlier, you can have a strong quarterback. Tom Brady is considered one of the best quarterbacks, if not the best quarterback in the history of football. He still makes mistakes in every single game. It's very rare that you even hear a commentator approach the notion that he had a perfect game or a flawless game. Even the best of the best, even people who are strong in their profession, are going to make mistakes. Mistakes are simply part of that baseline. It's just something that happens. I don't think a mistake makes you weak or indicates a weakness. it's a fluke, really, is what it is. Unless you make a lot of them, in which case, then there's probably a weakness underneath the surface there. So those are the first two, for lack of a better word, bastardizations of the word strong. We have strong female caricature, and we have a poorly written female character. The third option is a little less nefarious. It's probably not even conscious, and it's far more prevalent. And it's a way that a lot of my friends have used the word. And that is essentially, when they say it's a strong female character, they're essentially saying she's a character that I liked. It's as simple as that. We like to, as people, we want our opinions to have more weight. So a lot of times we'll frame what we're saying in a way that it doesn't sound like an opinion, sounds more like a statement of fact. If I say, I don't like what that guy said, it really made me angry, big whoop. People just look at that, okay, that's my opinion, that's how I feel, nobody cares. But if I say, that person said something dangerous, now I've applied ostensibly an objective measurement to it. I've made it more of a fact. And therefore, if you don't care about what that person said, you don't care that they are saying something that is dangerous. If I say I liked a movie, it's not as powerful or as strong as me saying that was a very good movie. If I state that was a good movie and you don't agree with me, you're saying you don't like good movies. Or if I just say I like a movie and you say you dislike the movie, well, okay, we just have different experiences. So we just have a natural tendency to try to make our opinion seem more factual or more objective. And so it's one thing to say, I liked this female character. Okay, that's your opinion. But if I say she's a strong female character, then if you don't like her, then you don't like strong female characters. You see, but I don't think it's a conscious thing. I don't think my friends are trying to pigeonhole that and say, well, you have to like this character, otherwise you don't like strong female characters. But it is still inaccurate because it doesn't actually describe anything about that character. I had a friend of mine, I was asking for recommendations for a K-drama, which I watch from time to time, and she recommended a show called Healer, and she listed off a bunch of reasons why she liked it. And when she talked about the male character, she just said, oh, he's really athletic, he does parkour, he does some really cool fight scenes, he's kind of dreamy, and he's just, he does really well as a romantic lead. Like he has these moments of romance, and it just makes me go squee. That was one of her phrases. Anyway, but when she talked about the female character, she said, oh, strong female lead. So we didn't have a strong male lead. We have a strong female lead. And we weren't quite as mired in this nonsensical, strong female garbage back then. But I had heard enough people trying to champion the strong female caricature that I was very wary of the term strong female lead. I was like, oh crap, this is probably going to be a poorly written character or just a gross exaggeration of what a very infantile mind thinks strength looks like. I was very pleased to find that that was not the case. She was actually a very well-written character. It was a very well-done show, and I enjoyed it immensely. But it did beg the question then, what did my friend mean when she said the female lead was strong? Because she actually had lots of moments of strength and lots of moments of weakness, probably more so weakness than strength. And I think almost that has to be the formula. I think, and we're going to get into in a little bit, we're going to actually be talking about an actual movie. We're going to look at different beats in a movie. And I think most of the time you see a character in a moment of weakness, it's the small, minuscule moments of strength that add up to a moment of triumph at the end that really make it work. But the weaknesses really, really connect you with the character. Anyway, they did that in this show. And a lot of times they would take an attribute of hers, a strength of hers, and they would take it to excess. Anytime we take a strength to excess, it becomes a liability or a weakness. So she was very impulsive and very proactive, that's pretty much two sides of the same coin. You got proactive, which is good. And then if you carry it too far, it becomes impulsive. And so she would use that she was an aspiring journalist. She would use that to get the scoop. She would use that to put herself in a position where she could obtain her objective, whether it's to get an interview, whether it was to see where someone was going, whatever it was. But the other side of that, taken to excess, impulsive, it would put her into situations that she was not prepared for. Without thinking, she would overstep what she wanted to do or where she wanted to go, and she would end up in a bit of a pickle. That wasn't the only time. Those weren't the only instances of weakness we saw, but that was, I think, the most common one. But again, very well-written character. But it didn't, and I realized that my friend did a very poor job of communicating what actually was commendable or what actually was good about that character. And to put a finer point on it, if you have in movie A, You have a female character who is very, not aggressive, but she's very forward. She's very focused. She's very passionate, and she's very driven. And because of that, she comes on very strong, and she's very convincing, and she uses that to great effect. She usually gets what she wants about 75% of the time just by coming strong out of the gate, whether it's getting a date, whether it's making a presentation or convincing, making a sales pitch, or getting a job, whatever it is, she makes a great first impression, and she really comes on strong and just closes the deal most of the time. However, because she does close it most of the time, she does not have a lot of endurance. She does not have a lot of perseverance, partially because of the way she's wired, which it makes sense. If you're really strong at the beginning, coming right out of the gate, you may not have the endurance later on, but also because she's successful most of the time, she doesn't have to work on that weaker side of herself. She doesn't have to work on that perseverance. So again, gets great results immediately, but if she has to go into extra innings, if somebody says, let me think about it, or she gets rejected, she doesn't have the stamina most of the time to continue to persevere, and that she'll just give up. In movie B, you have a character, she's a little more timid, a little more reserved, and she's certainly not as aggressive. So she plays a long game. She's used to having to endure and to persevere because she kind of eases into things. She's a little more reserved, as I said, and it takes her longer to get those results. She gets about the same success rate, 75%. It just takes her, it's a longer burn for her. You could say in both cases, you could say, oh, strong female lead for both of those movies, A and B, but they're decidedly different manifestations of that strength and of those weaknesses. And so just to say it's a strong character, it tells me absolutely nothing, even though they are completely different. You've lumped them together in this nebulous nothing term of strong. And I'm left having to actually now, when I'm watching them, I've got to figure out, okay, what exactly did they mean by that word? So the next time you hear someone say they want to see a strong female character, chances are what they're actually saying is they want to see a strong female caricature, they want to see a poorly written female character, or they simply want to see a female character that they like. And that last one is harmless enough, but it doesn't actually articulate what they're looking for in a character or why they actually like the character. It's a big nothing. The word strong needs to be taken out of our vocabulary when it comes to describing characters. It sounds good, it has a good ring to it, but it doesn't really communicate or articulate what we want to say. So we need to get rid of the whole concept of a strong character. The reason I care about this so much, the reason why the fixation, this modern fixation on a strong female character, why it bothers me so much, is because it's actively destroying storytelling. And to drive this point home, think about the movie Rocky. If I was a creatively bankrupt Hollywood executive and I wanted to just continue the trend of sex swapping the lead character from a male to a female, keeping most of the same plot points, phoning it in essentially, being very lazy, maybe use ChatGPT or AI to fill in some of the gaps, but really just keep the story as it is and just do a sex swap and call it good, I might be inclined to go for Rocky and call it Rockette. Because, Rocky punches people in the face. He's violent. He's got muscles. He's a strong male character. Therefore, if I just swap out Rocky for Rockette, I now have a strong female character. The problem for our creatively bankrupt Hollywood executive is that Rocky is not a strong character by the standards set out by the people clamoring for strong female characters. Rocky is a bum. He is not only poor, but he is rather unkempt. He does not have a stellar boxing career. He's in the amateur league, and even though he wins, he's not dominating. We don't look at him and go, "Oh man, just give this guy a chance, and he's gonna be awesome." He's not uplifted by those around him. He's not admired by those around him. He is not celebrated for his skill and his attributes. He has a job of ill repute. He is told by his boss that he's kind of essentially saying, "You're stupid. Shut up and do what I tell you to do. Don't think for yourself." The chauffeur for the loan shark is constantly putting him down, poking at him. Rocky gets agitated, but he doesn't actually cut the guy down to size. He doesn't punch him, doesn't inflict any violence. You could say he doesn't really stand up for himself. He falls in love. He is pursuing a relationship with Adrian, and he is the pursuer. He is decidedly not the one in control of the relationship. If there is a power dynamic, which is a fixation in modern Hollywood, I think I mentioned that already, it's strongly in her favor. She is resisting him, at least initially, even though she's very shy and timid. She is kind of holding him at arm's length, and he is pursuing her. That wouldn't be okay for Rocket to be humiliated or embarrassed by pursuing somebody and being shut down. There would have to be a shift in that dynamic. He would have to understand that, oh, wait, no, I do like you. And she would have to say, no, I'm not interested anymore, and have him grovel and beg and come after her time and time again. And then finally her say, okay, I'll give you a second chance, so that we know she is in control of the situation. Rocky's goal isn't to be a champion. It's not to reign supreme. His goal, it's a very personal goal. He just wants to prove that he can go the distance. He wants to show that he had what it took. And crazily enough, initially he doesn't. It isn't until he gets Mick, the trainer, in his corner that he actually is able to be a contender. Before that, as he even says, I don't have any legs. I think I'm going to get my face punched in. I think I'm going to get my butt kicked. I'm scared to death. He actually makes that confession. That doesn't sound very strong to me. And we see him actually improving during the training montage and the training sequences. Mick actually gives some advice and has him work on things to shore up his weaknesses. But that's a problem for our strong female character because she can't be deficient. Her coach, her manager, exists only to be a cheerleader. He's only there to affirm how strong and how awesome and amazing she is. He's not there to point out that she actually has weaknesses, that she's actually deficient in any way. So that's not going to work either. And when Rocky finally does attain his very humble goal of just going the distance, and barely does it, I mean, you see he's torn up. He barely makes it to that finish line, barely goes the distance, but he does make it, doesn't win, is not exalted. Nobody's like, oh, you're the best ever, you're the greatest ever. Again, not going to work for our strong female character who needs to be affirmed and needs to excel, needs to be the best in order to be strong, because losing is weakness. Cobra Kai, losing is for weaklings, and compassion is for weaklings. But the big problem, the really big problem with Rocky is at the very end, when Rocky achieves his goal, when he does go the distance and the fight is over, what does he do? Is he strutting around? Is he bragging? Is he saying, yeah, I'm the greatest? Or, hey, yeah, I accomplished my goal. No, he's calling out for Adrian. In his moment of triumph, in his moment of glory, in his professional ascension, at least on a personal level, he's calling out for Adrian. That's all he cares about, is the love of his life. That is not okay. We're not even allowed to have female characters talk about men within a certain span of time. There's some system out there, there's some test where if two female characters are talking, they can't talk about a man within a certain amount of time, or if they talk about him too much, they fail the test and they have to rewrite the scene. A strong female character is not allowed to care more about her relationship, to care more about the guy that she's with than she does about her professional goals, her professional ascension. And that ascension needs to be grandiose and dramatic in order for her to really appear strong. So just at a glance, Rocky, as it exists now, even though it is a very well-written character, even though it's a very compelling story and appeals to people. My mother actually told me, I mentioned to her that I was going to be using Rocky as an example, and she said, oh, I love Rocky, because she was a swimmer, on track, actually, arguably, to be an Olympic contender. Rocky resonated with her because she could identify with the competitiveness, the desire to persevere, the desire to go that distance, and the grueling training that you have to go through. So she actually enjoyed Rocky. She was in the theater when it came out, and she actually liked the heck out of it, even though she's not a male, and even though Rocky is not a strong male character, she could still identify with and appreciate and relate to him as a character. So you have a very serviceable, well-done movie, a very well-written character, but that would be a problem for someone trying to adapt it for a strong female character. And so the question then is, really, do we need strong female characters as they are defined today? The answer is no. In fact, we need to get rid of that concept entirely. We need to go back 7 years before there was such a thing as the notion of a strong female character. The movies are not going to get any better, specifically the ones with female leads, until we scrap that idea and stop fixating on this warped, perverted version of what a female should be and how her strength, individual strength, her moments of strength are conveyed to an audience. Ultimately needs to be relatable, needs to be able to connect with the audience. And that's just something that cannot be done when you're dealing with something that doesn't actually exist in real life. That's all I've got. This is going to be an abrupt ending. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate your time. And I will see you at the next episode.